Hi, everybody. I did not have any idea when we scheduled this that we would be preempted by events that are unfolding now with attacks on Israel. I have to say, just to be um, peevish about it, uh, listening to CNN talk about how uh, this is an unprecedented accelerate. Um, uh, it was so annoying because meanwhile, Beirut is being bombed regularly, and it's like this is the beginning and end of everything. Nothing else has happened but this. And so it's that part of it's a little annoying. Let me just begin. I wanted to jump in. We're being joined by a number of wonderful folks who are taking the lead in this discussion. And Paula Yakubian will be joining us in a minute. She had some connection issues. Paula is a Lebanese Armenian member of the parliament. She was part of that group that was doing a sit-in demanding that they come together to finally elect a president. Before running in politics, she was a journalist, a television host, and a political activist. And I both was a guest on her show and had her as a guest when I used to have my own TV show. Imad Harb is Director of Research and Analysis at the Arab Center here in Washington. He writes and publishes on a number of topics, including civil military relations, regional politics, and U.S. policy in the region. Paul Salem is Vice President for International Engagement at the Middle East Institute. He was the president and CEO. He's currently serving in the Middle East, based in the Middle East, and I've known Paul for decades. Mohammed Bezi is director of the Kevorkian Center of Near East Studies, an associate professor of journalism at NYU. Before that, he was Middle East bureau chief at Newsday, where he established bureaus in Baghdad and Beirut. And Daisy Geron is a multi-award-winning filmmaker and journalist, entrepreneur, and activist. Her film Enough premiered here a couple of years ago in DC, and just a remarkable film about corruption and the aftermath of the port blast in Beirut. And Rami Khouri finally is a distinguished fellow at AUB, non-resident senior fellow at the Arab Center in Washington, a journalist and author, and used to be my boss when he was editor of the newspaper in Jordan, the Jordan Daily, the Jordan Rami.
The Jordan Times.
That's it, the Jordan Times. Anyway, thank you all for joining, and I want to start, if I could, with Imad, because Paula was going to lead off too, and we hope we get her back in time. I wanted to ask about the situation on the ground in Lebanon. We're getting so little news from there, other than missiles hitting here, missiles hitting here. I mean, even in the case when I mentioned earlier about Nasrallah was killed in an explosion that apparently blew up a whole city block and maybe more. And they said 6 civilian casualties, and it's not that we want to play the victimhood Olympics here to see who suffers the most, but clearly there's a lot of casualties, and yet we're not getting a story on that, and we're not getting reports in terms of the kind of physical damage that are being that's being incurred. Talk a little about what you're seeing on the ground there in Lebanon from your vantage point.
Well, thanks, Jim, for having me on. What has been happening over the last 2 weeks is actually truly devastating to Lebanon and to any country that would be exposed to such brutality. Israel has free skies. It can bomb anywhere, and nobody is stopping Israel from bombing anywhere. It has bombed the south. It's been bombing the south since October 8th, 2023, and reports are that the border towns are all decimated. There is hardly anybody living there anymore. And originally there were about 110,000 displaced from the south. That's before the last 3 or 4 weeks or so. But over during the last 3 or 4 weeks, Israeli operations all over Lebanon, and specifically in the south and in the southern suburbs of Beirut, where Israeli airplanes have actually bombed. You're right about city blocks. They do bomb city blocks, and they raise city blocks in one bombing. Today, they hit like 8 different buildings together and leveled them, so to speak, and also in a little neighborhood in the southern suburb. There are an estimated 1 million people, at least 700,000 people who have been displaced from the south and from the southern district, the southern suburbs of Beirut. They have been displaced. Really, if you ask about where they are going, off the air, you said something about, there are 1 million refugees and Syrian refugees in Lebanon. Where are these displaced people going? Really, nobody knows. A lot of them are going into schools and universities. A lot of them are simply just sleeping at the streets. I just, before we went on the air, I saw a picture of people sleeping in the square in front of the parliament building in Beirut because there is no place to go. There have been many of them displaced have gone to different areas of the country where they have been hosted by different communities. I live in the Shuf, and there are thousands and thousands of people from the south and from the Dahiya, from the southern suburbs of Beirut, in the Shuf, being hosted in schools or in individual homes, and some of them have, many people have opened their homes for them. So there is some sort of a national feeling that we want to help these people, and because they have nowhere else to go. As far as the Israeli military campaign is concerned, there is the talk about a military incursion in the south. UNIFIL about 2 hours ago denied that there have not been any incursion, but later on they admitted that there have been incursions in some places, very small incursions. Hezbollah says no, there has not been any invasion or incursion of Israeli forces. So it's really still a very, very fluid situation. And not very many people. You're right about the casualty figures. Nobody really knows. Although
let me go to Paula for a minute. Paula, I see you're back. Thanks for doing this. Can you talk a bit about the capacity issue of what you're seeing, the ability of the country right now to absorb this tragedy? I mean, how many decades now Lebanon's been on the brink, and you wonder when it goes over the edge. But how is the country coping? Imad says that communities are taking people in, but there has to be at some point an absorptive capacity reached, and a difficulty to do that. What is the situation now that you're seeing?
Thank you, Jim, for doing this. And I would like to say hi to everyone joining. Well, Lebanon is not coping with this. Yes, the communities are helping each other. It's one country, one nation, after all, even despite all the division that is every day, inflicted by the corrupt junta that is ruling our country. But the catastrophe is too big, and it was somehow no one was able to predict it. No one imagined the scenario that happened and that it's gonna unfold like that so quickly before our eyes. And I think right now we might be also on another level, like an all-out war, because now Iran launched missiles to Israel, and all of us we've heard the threats from Netanyahu. So maybe it won't even stay in Lebanon, but Lebanon is always the preferred battlefield for all regional and international forces, since we do not really have a government. It's just a puppet government for the political parties, the highly corrupt political parties. So the country is facing a new catastrophe after the financial meltdown, after lots of problems that we all know about. So having so many people displaced, I think we crossed 200,000 people displaced, more than 1,000 lost their lives, mostly children and women, and so it's a very big catastrophe, and I don't really see a real help, especially the first days, from international organizations, from countries. 2 days ago, the only serious help came from UAE, $100 million. The rest is some pledges for medical help. I've seen one or two airplanes coming from Jordan. So Lebanon is somehow left alone, and people are just wondering how it happened. So it's a shock and awe kind of war. Ahmad was describing it. People are in the street, sleeping in the street. We're trying to bring mattresses, covers all the time, and it's never enough. We're overwhelmed with phone calls, with people calling the hotline, and we are really unable of helping as many people as possible.
Is this going to kickstart anything toward any sort of creating some sort of governance and reform, or will it just simply pass like every other tragedy the country's been affected by?
Well, you know, since the port explosion, since the Saura, the revolution that happened, we are sure right now that those ruling the country, they just have one concern: how to stay in power and how to, you know, survive anything that happens. And they know how to benefit from each and every crisis to stay in power, to, you know, keep their grip on Lebanon, and nothing else matters. People's life are not important. I mean, they broke the will of the Lebanese people, and it wasn't easy to do. I mean, the Lebanese are known to create hope when there's no hope, but they've been for so long in power, you know, using sectarianism and clientelism, nepotism, and staying in power all the time. So they are pros in how to, you know, handle any situation and just, you know, bring it for their advantage. But the interest of people in Lebanon is not on the agenda, unfortunately. So we are working, you know, with consideration that there's no government. I was trying to tell you, I was trying to get mattresses from Syria, and I was able to secure these mattresses from Syria. It arrived to the Syrian security forces. They stopped it. We talked to someone, and this someone was able to release it. And then it arrived to the Lebanese authority, to the Lebanese customs. And that was another thing. We had to pay to just release the mattresses in the middle of this crisis, in the middle of this problem. I'm just telling you this to tell you to what extent the Lebanese are ruled by a ruthless, corrupt people that don't care about anything. They just don't care about anything, and they don't know what is crisis management. They just don't care. They're fine.
Let me stop you. Let me just stop you there, because I want to go to Daisy for a minute.
Sure.
I want to continue on. I want to go back at some point to the conditions on the ground and what we need. But now that we're in this thread here, Daisy, you made a film about this, and does this exacerbate the problem? Does it simply create a deeper sense of despair and depression, or is there a resolve to move forward on the part of enough people to bring us back to where we were in October of 2019?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for being interested in engaging in this conversation, which is extremely critical, not only to Lebanon. I keep repeating, it's not about Lebanon, it's not about Palestine, it's about our humanity, and that's what the world is facing right now. But to Paula's point, you know, what your question about exacerbating the situation desperately, people are desperate at the moment in Lebanon, not only that, the diaspora around the world are extremely desperate about what they can do. And the powers that be are exploiting every opportunity. As Paula just explained, whenever they have an opportunity, they will exploit it to serve their own benefit. And, you know, we are hearing from Netanyahu, who's projecting this narrative saying, you know, we're going to clean Lebanon up for you now, get rid of Hezbollah so that you can have a legitimate government and you can be a sovereign nation and move forward. This is a, you know, pretense. It's the same narrative he used with the Palestinians in Gaza, getting rid of Hamas. The people in Lebanon are extremely distraught. They're hanging on by a thread. I've been living there for the last 2.5 months. I was one of the fortunate ones that got to leave last week before Israel's bombing started. And I'm in Dubai, but I'm in constant contact daily with the people, with the desperation on the ground. The point is, everyone's making a big deal about Hezbollah and has been for years. And unquestionably, they are a terror organization that has been controlling Lebanon. But the point, as Paula just mentioned, it's not just about Hezbollah. Hezbollah, with this oligarchy that's been controlling the country, has been bringing it to ruin. And right now, we have to ask Paula and the members of parliament, one of the questions I'd like to ask is, what can the politicians do now? Because we do need a president. If they claim, and there's so many political parties in Lebanon who claim that they have no way of changing the government or improving the situation because Hezbollah has had a control over the political system and the security system in Lebanon. Well, right now, Hezbollah has been weakened. It's in the weakest state it's been in 30 years. Is it not ripe now for the Lebanese parliamentarians, all of these parties that are in the opposition, to come together and demand a parliamentary session to elect a president and start moving down that road towards, you know, independence and sovereignty, and call on the Lebanese army, install and implement Resolution 1701, tell the Israelis, tell the world we're going to implement 1701, and send the army down to control the south so that they don't have to fear. Israel doesn't have to invade. The Lebanese army should take control of its own territory. These are the issues that are being bandied around by Lebanese diaspora all around the world, saying, what can we do? Because we need to take charge of this opportunity. And I want to know if there is an opportunity within the Lebanese parliament right now, and if it's being discussed.
Let me go to, I want to go to Imad for, I'm sorry, to Mohammed for a moment, and then we'll go back to Paula and ask her that. Every time this happens in Lebanon, what we hear, not every time, we heard it in 82, we heard it in 2006, that this is going to make a new day possible. And what we see instead are deeper divisions and a sense of real communal anger and distance. I'll never forget 82 when, you know, Israel was bombing the hell out of West Beirut. People in East Beirut sitting on their porches watching it. And we had kids we wanted to bring over who were wounded, and we had hospitals here ready to take them in. And there were hospitals in East Beirut, but they wouldn't take the kids in. So we had to bring them here to the US for treatment. How deep are the divisions now? And is this, 2006 was a little different because there was a coming together in 2006 that was a little different than 82. Is this a dividing moment, or is this a moment that could bring people together?
I think you're right that 2006 was different. There was more coming together. There was also more. I mean, Lebanon was in a different situation. The financial collapse hadn't happened. There was a bit more support in the region. There was also, you know, amazingly, you know, and I'd like to bring us a little bit to the Biden administration, because I can't believe I'm saying this, but in some ways, the George W. Bush administration handled this better in 2006. I mean, essentially, I don't think they gave Israel the kind of green light that it seems to be getting out of Biden and out of the Biden administration. I mean, I think what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, what we've seen over the last 11 months is fairly incredible. But what we've seen over the past few weeks is even more stunning, because I think, and I agree with Daisy, I agree with Paula, I agree with everyone on the need for those longer term steps. But what we need to get to is a ceasefire right now. And those are the steps that, and that really involves the Biden administration, because Netanyahu is not going to offer a ceasefire on his own, it seems. But what we're caught in is this cycle where Biden and his aides will leak consistently over weeks and over months that he's trying to impose this pressure on Netanyahu and trying to cajole Netanyahu and all of these things. And in the meantime, we see counter leaks that other members of the administration are actually encouraging an invasion or a ground incursion, as the Biden administration likes to call it. So that's the reality we're at, where I think, and I think for this audience in particular, maybe some thinking about what kind of pressure, not that Biden and anyone in his administration seems to be open to any sort of electoral pressure at this point, but what kind of pressure can this community exert on the Biden administration to get at least to that ceasefire, a real ceasefire backed by actual leverage and actual pressure on Netanyahu? And that means inevitably withholding or threatening to withhold arms shipments, because that seems to be the only leverage Biden has. It's very significant leverage, but he's not willing, and he hasn't been willing to use it for many months.
I was commenting a moment ago. The Washington Post today, if you open, there were two facing pages, right, on the inside that had three stories that took up the whole space. The top one was that the Biden administration complains they have no leverage over Israel, yes. Right? The next one underneath that was U.S. to send more ships and more squadrons and more weapons to the Middle East. And on the top of the next page, it was the 2,000-pound U.S. supplied bunker bombs that took out the building in Nasrallah. And I thought, wait, don't they read their own headlines? If you're supplying all this and supplying all that, then of course you got leverage. But if you render yourself impotent, then the leverage can't be used for anything. Paul, I want to get to you to deal with the question that Daisy, but I want to go first to Rami, who is a student of both here and there. And you've been picking up the thread, Rami, of what's happening. We talked yesterday for a moment about the disconnect in the political discourse here and the political discourse there. Elaborate on that just a moment, how differently we see it and play it out here as opposed to what's really happening in the region.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks to the Arab American Institute for doing this. It's been quite extraordinary for me to be in the U.S. living permanently for the last 3.5 years, after the last 50 in the Middle East, and to see close up the different dynamics in the U.S., political, media, military, other dynamics. And I'm absolutely convinced now, after Gaza and now watching the Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran, Israel dynamic, I'm absolutely convinced that what we are witnessing and experiencing, and the reason that the Palestinian and Lebanese people have been suffering so much, is that the United States, with Great Britain as junior partner, are reaffirming the continuity of the old imperial colonial order in the Middle East, in supporting Gaza's destruction. Not just its destruction, its vulgar, barbaric destruction by Israel. And they are supporting anything Israel wants to do in Lebanon. And they are supporting anything Israel wants to do against Iran. What's obvious is several things that come out through the media, especially if you follow the media, the mainstream media. There are exceptions, of course, here and there. But first of all, the media is in love with military stuff. They love military stuff. In fact, most American society is very militaristic. If you just watch a football game, or you see that the military seeps into everything. And that's not bad. Militaries are good to defend your country, but they're not good when they're used for imperial purposes abroad. The focus on Israel as the good guy is so obvious in most of the mainstream media. They just take whatever Israel says at face value, that it's now going into limited pinprick small operations in South Lebanon to clear out the bad guys and allow the civilians in northern Israel to go back to their homes.
Didn't I remember reading that about Rafah?
Yes, well, this is class. I mean, the combination of Gaza and Lebanon is overwhelming in the evidence. The prioritization of Israel as the focal point of the news. So you'll see a lot of headlines about Israel is attacked or missiles go into Israel. They rarely give you the full context of the conflict today between different people, and they almost never give you, the media almost never gives you the context historically of why people do what they do. The whole issue of where did Hezbollah and Hamas come from? You know, they're presented as the great evil actors, and they've done some terrible things, but there's a bigger story about Hezbollah and Hamas, and there's no context that these two groups emerged as an indigenous, organic, local nationalist response in Lebanon and Palestine to the subjugation and occupation and continued attacks by the Israelis over the years. Before the Islamic government in Iran took shape. And so there's no context that's given. There's always a bad guy that has to be behind the scenes orchestrating things. Iran is the bad guy today, that all the bad people are linked to Iran and they're puppets of Iran. So Hezbollah, Hamas, all these groups are called proxies of Iran. I don't think they're proxies. I think they're ideological partners. They're very close. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think Iran tells them what to do. And they certainly, they were born.
Friend of mine, Anthony Lake, who was National Security Advisor to Clinton in his first term. He'd served under Carter as well. Wrote a book during the Cold War. He said the problem that we had in the U.S. was that every national liberation struggle around the world was seen as a Soviet puppet. We never understood them in terms of their local conditions. Yes, the Soviets were supplying them. Yes, they were backing them. Yes, they were giving them the support they needed. But he said they wouldn't have existed had there not been indigenous conditions there doing it. We do the same thing now.
Right, and
and it does distort the political discourse here in the U.S. in a way that makes it impossible for us to play a meaningful role. I'm not a fan of Hezbollah. I'm not a fan of Hamas. I'm not a fan of any of these guys. But you're right. There are reasons why they exist. I'm not a fan of Netanyahu either. And I'm not sure what the reason is. Anyway, let me stop myself. I want to go to Paula for a minute, because Paula, we did have a question today about whether or not Parliament was actually meeting, talking, and is there a role to play? And does it matter if you have a president now, given the circumstance that we're facing?
Let's not waste any time on this Parliament. This is Barry's backyard. He does whatever he wants. There is no real Parliament in Lebanon. We are almost 10% in this Parliament, but there's nothing we can do because he holds the keys, and he turned the Parliament into something that is, 100% in the pocket of Amal movement. So no, they don't want to open the Parliament. They don't want any, debate, serious debate in the Parliament, and at the same time they don't want to elect a president, because every party in Lebanon, they think that if they wait a little bit more, they can get the president, their preferred president, they can get, their candidate. So unfortunately, Lebanon is paying the price. But before getting into this I would like to say something. I'm a very big fan of Mr. Rami Khouri, and I agree most of the time with everything he says. However, and I understand that Hezbollah and Hamas and all these movements, they have all the legitimacy to fight Israel. However, they are proxies of Iran. They say it themselves, not maybe not jihad, not Hamas, but when it comes to Hezbollah, this is a statement very clear from the late Sayyid Nasrallah. He said it bluntly. These Hezbollah is the biggest success story for Iran, the most successful group. They tried to replicate Hezbollah in many countries. It didn't work that well. And let me tell you one thing. I had the feeling till today, till these missiles that were launched right now, that Iran is willing to fight until the last Arab Shia in the Arab world. In the 90s, Jim, in 92, 93, Ali Izzat Begovic called Khamenei for help. And he told him that they were friends, obviously, and he asked for help. He sent Hezbollah troops to some of them to die there, helping Ali Izzat Begovic. And they hardly sent a few top commanders, Iranian top commanders, who did not put foot on the ground. In Syria, they sent also a little bit more commanders, but also they didn't fight. Hezbollah is the party that fought all the wars and did all the agenda of Iran. Definitely, they have ideological ties. They believe in Wilayat al-Faqih and all of that, but since I was born, I didn't see any Lebanese agenda in this politics. Lebanon was paying the price alone. And we can see right now the whole community is displaced in the streets. We can see that, all the slogans and everything that happened before, it just fell apart like géant de papier,
Let me go to Imad. Let me go to Imad for a second. Imad, what is an agenda now? And I almost hesitate to raise that issue because the agenda ought to be housing for people, getting people, as I think as was said, a ceasefire. That's probably the top agenda. But
That's
is
correct.
there an agenda moving forward? And how possible is it? Or are we just going to flounder in this position for a decade yet to come?
Well, unfortunately, this is a great question, but unfortunately, considering the state of the Lebanese state, we probably will flounder for a long time. We're talking about, Paula was talking about that there have not been really any efforts to provide any assistance to Lebanon in its current crisis. The Lebanese state is not there. The Lebanese state is broke, and the Lebanese state, the Lebanese people have been made broke by the Lebanese bankers anyway, with the corruption. So I'm afraid the only thing that's going to happen is the communities themselves try to basically pick themselves up with their own bootstraps, like they say. Unfortunately, the funds that are going to be used for reconstruction or anything like that are these are political funds. It's the politics that's going to govern who funds what funding comes to Lebanon for reconstruction or taking care of the communities. The state, unfortunately, is sidelined. The state is not there, and this is what I'm saying. It's going to be very, very difficult for Lebanon to really pick itself up. It has not been able to, for definitely domestic political reasons, to even investigate the port explosion in 2020. Let alone deal with the catastrophe that's going on today. So I think we're going to be waiting for a long time for people to go back to their homes, for students to go back to their schools, and for Lebanon to really become what it's supposed to be. But then again, if you really want to look to find some sort of a silver lining somewhere, maybe, Paula has really doubts about the Lebanese parliament being able to do something because Nabih Berri and the Amal movement prevents it from convening. But I don't know. Maybe there will be some sort of a critical mass of public pressure, or the situation itself forces Nabih Berri to really allow parliament to meet to elect a president, because you mentioned that maybe the president won't make any difference, but finding an executive for the country is very, very important. It brings legitimacy to the state. It probably gives the state some power to really assert itself, and hopefully that will be the silver lining that would happen soon.
Mohammed, silver lining, can you give us a little hope here?
I was going to make a point about something. I will get to
So
hope.
make
but
the
I want to
point
make a quick
first.
point about something that came up a couple of
Yeah.
times, which is deployment of the Lebanese army in the south, and deployment of the Lebanese army over Lebanon in general, and being shaping the army into the institution that it should be. And the point that I think often gets lost in Washington, I think it doesn't get lost on all of the people joining from Lebanon, certainly, and on Paula and Imad and Daisy and others, is that the Lebanese army is purposefully left weak. And part of that weakness is because Israel won't allow the US, won't allow France, won't allow other Western countries to arm and provide supplies to the Lebanese army in the way that it needs to. So the army isn't seen as a credible force that would actually be able to deploy in the south and be to serve a defensive purpose against Israel. I mean, ultimately, and this doesn't just connect to Netanyahu government. I mean, any Israeli government would want a severely weakened Lebanese army. And that's not something that's going to work in this situation. So I think that should be on everyone's radar. That's something probably maybe somewhat tangible that in the effort to help resolve this and get us to a ceasefire, that we can get the Lebanese army the help it needs, and that's something that the community here can pressure for. I think if there is a silver lining, it's what civil society is actually doing and stepping in, and as it's always done in Lebanon, and they're small scale efforts. So not to be, we don't want to. The government should carry out the efforts that civil society ends up carrying out, but that sign, I don't want to use the word resilience, that's overused in the context of Lebanon, but that effort of civil society is what's kept the economy and the society going for the past 5 years. And it's keeping it going through this incredible trauma today.
Mm-hmm. Daisy, I want to come back to you, and then I want to go to Paula and Rami. Away from the politics and more focused on the issues that Mohammed was raising about civil society, about what is happening in the country. I asked him the question before, is this 82 or is it more like 2006? Is in terms of people's reaction, is there a sense of coming together, or is this going to exacerbate internal tensions, which are always there under the surface in the country, as we know? But how is this impacting people? I was heartened by Imad's point about how people are going to villages and finding care and concern from people, but that too could be part of the division if it's my people from my tribe, from my religion, come to my village, but no, keep out from this other. How do you think this is going to play out? And I'd like to get you and Paula and Rami on that note, because I think that's
it's a very important point, and this is a silver lining that is actually happening on the ground. It's more of definitely a 2006. Definitely, this is uniting the people And I've been on calls every single day in groups and the diaspora and with those in Lebanon who are trying to pool resources. As Paula said, they need bedding, they need clothes, they need diapers, they need formula. And it doesn't matter what religion you are, they're embracing them. I've been on groups offering, trying to find accommodation for Shiite families from the south, from the Bekaa, from Dahya. I've got one of my team who had to leave the area around the Dahya looking for accommodation. Christian families are offering accommodation. It's irrelevant what your religion is. And that is the beauty that I'm actually engaging and seeing and witnessing myself, that people are not sitting back. That look, the reality is, yes, when I talk to people in East Beirut and the northern parts of Lebanon, they say it's quiet. What they've been saying to me, even all the way up to Tripoli, they said, look, there are more planes now overhead. The planes are covering the entire skies of Lebanon, no longer just the south of Beirut. There's sporadic bombing in different areas across Lebanon, but the people together are coming together to help each other. They're definitely embracing each other, and this is not divided, and it's irrelevant what religion you are. So that I'm taking complete heart in, and feeling that we are not, we're feeling that we are one nation. And that is what people are saying politically as well, on comments on social media, but on TV, that we have to remember we are one nation. It doesn't matter if if they're Shiite or Sunni or whatever their background. And most of those affected are Shiite, but there's a lot of Christian families in the south and around those other areas that have been affected. So that is definitely a very positive. I hope, we always have to come back to the people. The people have kept the country together all through every crisis Lebanon's come through. The Lebanese government has failed on every level. There is no emergency system. There's people who are asking for drilling equipment to be able to save people who they could hear under the rubble in different areas, and there's no emergency system. They're trying to find out how they can get emergency technology or the equipment to get those people out. It's a mockery of a government. We don't have a government, and this is the tragedy, but the people are pulling in together.
Paula, coming together or not? And then Rami, you.
Coming together as best as can be, because you have to remember, and we all know and we've all seen it, in Lebanon, the political parties, they slice the cake between each others. However, when it comes to sectarianism, they all know they need to secure their base, and the best way to secure their base is to make it in confrontation with other communities. So they all play this game all the time, all over again, and it pays back when it comes to elections, when it comes to not being responsible of what's happening. So the game in Lebanon is the blame game. Every political party will tell you it's the other party. That's why we don't have electricity, we don't have anything, we don't have the economy, we don't have schools and infrastructure, anything. It's always the other. So each and every community in Lebanon wants change. However, they want other communities to change their leaders, and this system is very beneficial for all the corrupt political families / parties.
Here's what I wonder.
So let me tell you, Israel is a criminal terrorist state. We all know that. So we don't know how it's going to unfold. It's gonna. We've seen it in 2006. They were hitting bridges. They were hitting in all regions, all areas. It's a terrorist state. And today they feel like they have the upper hand in Lebanon, and that they should continue with the terror for all communities, not only the Shia. But now they're extremely happy that the Shia community especially is displaced, and that some other communities also, let's admit, Lebanese people don't love each other, don't feel like one nation, because they were every day listening to the same speeches, the hatred, the bitterness, the blame, all of it. If they think for a moment how they paid all of them the same price from the same political caste, they should be the nation that is the most unified on earth. But that's not the case, Jim. And some people are afraid, and you can see this in posts and everywhere on social media. They will come, they will not leave, they will come by force, they will, So for years and years, we are paying the price of the political statements done by these people. And we've seen it during the revolution. One of the biggest curses that we are living today is that the Lebanese population don't have anymore not only the hope, they don't think they can stand against the mafia. And this is something that happened after the revolution. They broke the revolution, and then Corona came, and then the explosion of Beirut, and people were like, oh, this is a cursed country, let's leave. Most those who left, the brain drain is from people who do not want these political parties. And those who stayed, I'm not generalizing, but mostly those who stayed in Lebanon are those who are somehow benefiting from the system, or they have jobs sometimes related or thanks to the political parties. So today, if you tell me what can we rely on mobilizing the people, tell them to take the streets again, tell them to claim again the power of the people, this is also it's a dream for me. However, are we capable to do it one more time? I'm not sure. The Lebanese
let me go to Rami.
very depressed and very tired. It's a tired.
Yeah.
And
let me just go to Rami for a second, because we're close on time here. One of the things I remembered about 2019 was that it was across the board. It was, there was no difference it was Tripoli. Almost every city had demonstrations to throw, in effect, the way we'd say it here, throw the bums out. And it made me think, because I remember an experience with Iraq that I learned, and that is that you had the sectarian parties, right? But then you had people. And I was doing one of my TV shows that I did with students in Baghdad, and somebody in the North Carolina audience asked about divisions between Shia and Sunni. And one kid from the Baghdad said, that's not true. He said, my mother's Sunni, my father's Shia. And I said, how many of you, to the Baghdad students, how many of you have mixed, Sunni, Shia, Christian in your family? Every hand went up. And so it was the rulers of the groups, not the people themselves. Is that the case in Lebanon? Is there this sense that the divisions are deep in the soul of people, or are they sort of imposed from on top for the advantage of those who govern? And does a crisis like this help create that sense of a common bond? Rami?
Yeah, we're talking about 2 or 3 different issues, but they really all come together in my view. My experience in Lebanon, I've lived there almost half my life as a small child, and then right after college, and then 20 years at AUB in the Daily Star. And I've noticed all of the great values that all the attributes of the Lebanese character. I've lived through them throughout my whole life. So there's no doubt that the Lebanese are able to live together and help each other. So are all people in the world. So this is not a uniquely Lebanese trait. All people in the world are decent people, but the systems that control them are not. These are not equitable systems. They're autocratic, they're top-heavy, and Paula described them, others have. What's really fascinating is that the entire Arab region, the whole region, is the only one in the world that, as a region, has no democratic, pluralistic, law-based governance system. It's all based on a power elite, and this power elite traces itself back to the British-French colonial period in which the US took over and after World War II. So what I said at the beginning, there's this desire to maintain this system because it served the interests of the West, but mainly it served the interests of Israel. And we see this constantly, this cycle coming and going. If you look at the Western media and public discussions about the current situation in the Middle East, there's two things they almost never talk about. One is law, international law, because Israel has thrown out every international law in the book or UN resolutions. And the other thing is historical context. Nobody talks about the historical context because it gets you into areas that the Israelis don't want to talk about, which is their behavior. So all the Arab countries, without exception, are non-democratic, but also if you take away the small, rich Gulf states who have enough money to take care of their people, they're not democratic, but their people aren't suffering as they are. The rest of the Arab world is a mess in terms of social and economic conditions. And that's why you had this incredible decade of uprisings from 210 from 210 to 220. And the elite just ignored it, basically, occasionally used military force, but basically ignored it. And not a single Arab government, not one, has fully succeeded in the 4 tests of any state, which is citizenship, sovereignty, security, and sustained equitable development. There isn't a single Arab country that has met those 4 standards. And this is the problem in our region, that and this goes back to the imperial control and the interests of Israel, and these are now being aggravated once and accentuated once again. Israel is now saying it wants to lay down the law for Iran and for other Arab countries, not just in Yemen and things like that. So this is a really hard cycle to break. The Arab countries don't have the military capability or the political will to challenge the Israel-US combine, which is very powerful and very ruthless. And you saw in Gaza, and you're seeing now here, the US was enthusiastic about supporting Israel to carry out its genocide. The more dead babies they found, the more decapitated kids, kids with no feet and arms, and the more that military support kept coming. So this is a real big problem, which is historical as well as political and contemporary, and Lebanon is suffering from it like others.
I'm gonna stop here, but thank you, all of you. And we're running out of time. Just one announcement: tomorrow at 2 o'clock, when we have the regular Coffee and Column, we're releasing a poll that we just finished on how Arab Americans will vote in November. There are surprises. It's very different than you expect. And no, Jill Stein's not winning the majority of the Arab American vote. I don't know where that comes from. But in any case, join us. My brother and I and Maya Berry will be doing it. Before I go, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank in particular our five guests who were speaking. And I want to apologize for the fact that we had paid for expanding the size of this beyond 300, but we stayed at 300 and we just kept getting new people coming in who couldn't get in. The tape of this will be available and we'll send it out to everyone so that those who want to see it do. One last thing, I want like 10, 15 seconds from each of you about what you expect in the next week for Lebanon, just for Lebanon, in terms of the people and what they'll endure and how they'll deal with it. I'll start with you, Daisy, and then Imad, and then we'll go there. Daisy, what do you expect in the next week or so?
I just expect more devastation and destruction. I believe there's going to be much more chaos and suffering for Lebanon, and people are going to have to bunker down. It's very tragic and devastating, but that's honestly everything that's coming out from Lebanon is saying that.
Imad?
Unfortunately, I'm going to agree with Daisy, but on the other hand, I also have great faith that the Lebanese are resilient enough to pick up and go. No matter what happens, the Lebanese are gonna still stick with it, and they're going to really make it through.
Mohammed?
Yeah, I mean the same. It's the next week, the next weeks, possibly until the election, are going to be devastating. Looking at the headlines of this attack, the Iranian missile attack on Israel, the Israelis are already vowing severe response. So that means Tehran, but it also means more bombardment of Beirut and all of Lebanon.
Rami?
I agree with those views, but I would add two issues that I'm going to keep looking at. I suspect at some point there's going to be a major effort made to bring in other major international actors to play a constructive role, not to leave it all to the U.S. and the Israelis. And I think they're going to try to decouple the local issues within Lebanon and Israel from the issue of relations with Iran. Unless those are resolved, then it's going to be hell.
Paula?
Well, when it comes to Lebanon, all politics are not local, and Lebanon is not isolated, Jim, as we all know. I'm worried that also we're just 4 weeks from the elections in the US, and I think that Netanyahu, Putin, many world leaders are eager to see a Trump era again, and trying to have an all-out war is obviously Netanyahu's aim. They did everything to get Iran into this war. So I think they want to bring the oil prices skyrocketing, and somehow they think it can be beneficial, for a Trump presidency. I'm not about these theories, however, the conspiracy theories. However, I think also this is also part of what's happening.
Paula, we're living in a world so insane that conspiracy theories sound just about right. And I want to thank you all again for taking time to do this, and I want to do it again in a couple of weeks, maybe in a better situation. But if it's not, I think the community really enjoyed the opportunity to hear from you and to talk about this. But next time we'll have it so that we'll make sure that Zoom gives us the capacity to have everybody. Look, we're facing a horrific situation. Israel's operating with total impunity and can do what they want, and decided that they would do what they want. And to add to your conspiracy theory, it's not just Trump. Netanyahu doesn't want wars to end, because if he does, he loses his government. If he loses his government, he goes to jail. And we know that. President Biden even acknowledged that. And yet we continue to allow him to pick one fight after another. He wants Iran in, and he wants the U.S. to join in this war. And I worry. And I worry in particular about the innocent Lebanese who are paying the price for all of this, and the Palestinians who've already paid the price and are continuing to pay the price. We'll talk about the election tomorrow with the new poll. Please sign up and join us tomorrow, and we'll continue to be following these issues. And thank you all for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for doing
Thanks.